My background's mainly from telco. I used to head up Internet of Things for MTN. So this is my first presentation where I'm not actually selling something. I'm just going to offer some insights that we learned from the industry. Okay, so in essence, what I'm going to take you through is what is IoT, but I think I'm speaking a lot to the converted. I didn't know some of the audience, the tech stack and how we've built it up, and then how big the opportunity actually is from a fleet and fleet and freight monitoring perspective, and again, then a roadmap to creating a digital fleet organization. So this is, I think, information that almost everybody has seen. The number of connected devices surpassed the number of human beings about 2 to 3 years ago, and it's growing exponentially. I think if we can take the fact that it took the telecommunications industry about 30 years to create that number of connections for human beings, and now we're about to grow at an exponential rate where we'll be doubling or even tripling that within a short space of 3 to 5 years, it shows you how many devices are coming on board. Your phone, your car, your house, your lights, etc. So this is a massive opportunity, and it means an incredible amount of opportunities if you're in the right place and you have the right offering. So going through the tech stack, right? So how do we understand or unpack this whole IoT thing? Everybody will tell you about a fleet monitoring solution, they'll tell you about a utility solution, but all of it needs a common stack in order to actually work out. So at the bottom layer, you've got your hardware. Hardware will account for about 35% of the market, the revenue that can be generated in this space. This is just purely because you need to put the sensors in there. Most challenging of which around hardware is that commonly, if you're only trying to solve for one problem, you often can't make a business case work because the cost of the kit that you're putting into the asset is probably quite expensive. So you need to look at from solving the problem in terms of maybe theft, what other use cases are you unlocking? What other value are unlocking for other departments so that they can co-invest in terms of the asset that goes into that space? Connectivity, as we know, this is bread and butter. The device, wherever it is, the remote needs to communicate back. The trend that we saw in telcos, we went from 50 Rand a month connection down to 15, down to 5, and it's going to get even lower with LP-WAN. So it's definitely a space that's always going to be there, but from an ARPU and ARPU is average revenue per subscriber. From the revenues that you're seeing in the connectivity space, it's probably one of the smallest. That's why telcos are moving into what they call managed connectivity. This is interfaces like GDSP from Vodacom, and MTN's got MTN Control Center. And in essence, it's internet banking for your SIM cards. It allows you to configure the SIM card, control which APN it's configured to, how much it's allowed to consume. If it starts doing anything erratic, notify me and cut that out. So that's in essence where the telcos are thinking of going. The next level becomes your device management and data management. This is where you're able to now actually access the device, upgrade the firmware, do resets, diagnostics, etc. And yeah, that gives you that fair level of control. Why these two elements are very important, I always like to use the example of Tums in Pretoria. They deployed 5,000 smart meters out in the industry, and on 3,700 of those, they had a second call out. Each call out is at 650 Rand a call out. 72% of the time, it was a network-related issue, which means it was a wasted call-out. You can imagine now if you have 1 million meters deployed in the market and you're doing all of this. If you don't have a connectivity management platform, you're unable to see whether your device is down because of network-related issues or because of physical tampering. The next piece becomes orchestration, integration, and automation. I think this comes mainly from now understanding that most IoT solutions are building within a siloed vertical and a siloed stack, but the data that they often pull out of that can be utilized within another solution vertical. So being able to orchestrate different applications, for example, an insurance company. You as an insured subscriber might have a home contents insurance and you'd have a car insurance as well. But from an insurance perspective, they don't want to be getting all this data every 10 seconds about how you're driving, etc. They'd like you to aggregate this and then only warn them on exceptions. So correlating that and giving the customer one unique view is going to become important in the end. Ecosystem enablement. I think the previous presenter was talking about being on Geotab's Marketplace. This is exactly that. It's about having a common marketplace which is using the same frameworks underneath, and you're able to sell multiple solutions to customers. Then the applications. Different providers here sell industry-specific applications. And then ultimately your services become the last element, which is What do you offer with that? The recovery of a stolen vehicle or the call center, etc. So the breakdown shows you all the different pockets of revenue that come out of IoT, and where, if you're playing in any one of those areas, what part of the market you're addressing. A telco would typically acquire about that level there, but they'd also be doing it through a combination of partners. The only piece they're only able to offer on their own is that bottom connectivity piece. The rest, they need to partner. So, the market size. I think there's been Analysis Mason, IDC, McKinsey, etc. You name them, they've all made predictions on how big this industry is going to be. If you look at the common line now, where we sit in 2019, you're looking at an average of about $3 to 4 billion US dollars, and this is just the South African market. I think the point I was trying to show with this slide is that it doesn't matter what everybody's predicting. It's actually just showing you that the opportunity is big, and everybody agrees on that. So taking the most pessimistic, which is the TNP partners, which is sitting at around $2 billion US dollars in 2021, we can see that the breakdown between SMME and large enterprises is what's really going to drive this. You'll see on the bottom there, the connectivity stays fairly constant, but grows at a very, very small CAGR, as opposed to the other services in the industry. These are all the vertical solutions, because customers are not buying connectivity for the sake of connectivity. Connectivity is a consequence of solving a problem. So that's where the mindset needs to be. This is where developers, partners need to be creating solutions that are solving customers' problems. Then, by consequence, you need to put in a SIM card, a Bluetooth, an LPWAN, or whatever it may be. SMMEs for the foreseeable futures aren't really going to be driving the market penetration, but they could be the service providers, because a lot of the companies are nimble enough to create the solutions that will track your tires, that stop theft, that do everything wonderful under IoT. So I think this slide shows you where to be targeting and where those pockets are. So breaking down the industry. If you look at the total value of $2 billion US in 2021, the pockets that are going to contribute mainly to that are highlighted in the slide. So typically when you hear people talk about IoT, fourth industrial revolution, and all of these things, they'll tell you it's all about verticals. Where do I focus? Manufacturing, government, retail, logistics, etc. And this shows you where the pockets are going, how they're going to be contributing. But over the next couple of slides, I want you to pay attention to the freight and the monitoring use cases within each one of these industry verticals, because you'll start to see a very direct correlation to about 15 specific use cases. So if you look at retail, that top blue line there is what represents the freight and monitoring. It shows you that that's the biggest use case within the retail industry from a revenue generation perspective for IoT. Moving into logistics, you'll see again, freight monitoring sits at the top, and underneath that is fleet management, a little bit lower down. Into agriculture, freight monitoring again sits on the top part, and you've got fleet monitoring about halfway down the slide there, and it's represented at the bottom. In your healthcare industries, you've got a bit of freight monitoring as well, but no fleet monitoring. You've got fleet monitoring, not fleet. In government, you've also, again, got a massive opportunity in terms of freight monitoring and fleet monitoring in the utility space. Telecoms, manufacturing, the trend is exactly the same. What I would like to draw your attention on is that in each one of those slides, in each one of those industries, there's actually 15 use cases that cover about 70% of the whole IoT market. So by doing just these 15 use cases and applying them across all these industries, you capture 70% of the opportunity. And that sits with freight monitoring, fleet management, energy consumption, and a lot of these are actually just monitor only and providing information back. It's not even getting to the point of automation and control. And understanding that then allows you to say, forget the verticals. What use case am I solving, and what's the problem that I'm solving? Then that becomes unilateral in the number of verticals that I can apply it to. So, as coming from a connectivity background, what's most interesting and what we were tracking is how connectivity pricing and the enablement of technology is then going to drive the next wave of connected devices. You see, up until date, there was data must fall because pricing from a GSM connectivity perspective was quite high. We've now had the advent of what we call low power wide area connections. You would have known this through a company called Sigfox. They're represented in South Africa by SquidNet. So they do very small connections, spending small bit rates. Your Vodacom's MTNs will be launching LP-WAN and some subtitle component of what they call LoRa. All of these are just low throughput technologies that allow the device to live out in the field for as long as possible. One of the use cases we used for LoRa was for a collar around what we call the sentinel animals in a game reserve. The idea being that we could protect the rhino by monitoring the animals of prey. Let me explain. The animals of prey like your eland, impala, etc., have over generations acquired an ability to detect danger because they need to be aware if somebody's going to come and lion is going to attack them, etc. So they've an acute awareness of their environment and what's happening. And the idea being that if you then stimulate them differently with a human being with a gun, a car, you start seeing how they react versus a lion or another animal of prey. And based on this, then, correlating that data, a poacher that's walking into a park is more likely to walk in and bump into an impala or an eland versus a rhino. So by watching how these different animals are moving, you could detect if there was a human being in the park. I'm happy to report that we increased the probability of catching a poacher from the current 3% with this solution to 86%. We can accurately tell you where there's a person up to 150 meters. And that's all just through the use of technology that's all existing. If you think about it, it's a gyromic sensor, it's a connectivity back, understanding the patterns, and Bob's your uncle. So on the right hand of that slide, I'm trying to just explain all of these terminologies that we have from a connectivity perspective. What you're very familiar with and what you're using on your devices is a 3G, 4G device, and that has a high bit rate. So that's what causes it to have high power consumption as well. Typically, you're charging it once a day, etc. If you remember back to the days of 3110s and those kind of Nokias, you could have that running for up to a week. That's because it was sitting a little bit lower down in terms of bit rate and consumption, so it allows it to optimize its power consumption. Same with the LP-WAN technologies. They take it a level further. They're almost consuming at a Bluetooth level the amount of data, but giving you quite a bit of range. From an NB-IoT perspective, you're able to penetrate now 8 meters within a wall and get about 15 kilometers coverage. So all of these kind of technologies enable us to do things that typically would not be available. I mean, if we try to do the rhino poaching solution with 2G, we can't be shooting down these animals every 6 months to change the battery. You know, we needed to pick technologies that allow us to keep these animals out there, living their lives, and yeah. All right, so what does the IoT Marketplace look like? So these are all the big companies that are playing from an applications, hardware, connectivity, security, systems integrations, investors, and the alliances. I think the point of trying to show you this slide is that you'll see that there's no common player in every level of the stack. So there's nobody who has the skills unilaterally. It's about how do you partner and how do you work with those partners in creating solutions and offerings to market. So how does connectivity help this game? So up until now, a lot of the tracking solutions work with your GPRS or 3G type technologies, and that allowed for a limited number of use cases to be enabled from an IoT perspective. Now we're moving into an LP-WAN area, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, that starts to enable the next wave of devices that can be connected. And then lastly, with your 5Gs and all of those technologies that are coming, that'll open up even more use cases. Drones are becoming a big topic and being used to solve a number of different situations, from traffic crashes to even birds at the airport. Idea is, if you're following the technology, you start to understand how what's the disadvantages and advantages of that specific technology, then allow for a number of additional use cases as well. All right, so how do you build a fleet and logistics, digital fleet and logistics organization? So we started where the current market is, where most people are looking at your basic track and trace. We're moving into an era now where your OEMs are starting to be very interested in vehicle diagnostics, and there's a usage-based insurance model. Currently, there's 2 main insurers in South Africa that are using the usage-based insurance model. And to give you a comparison, the industry average in terms of claims sits around 67%. Discoveries sits at 45%. They use usage-based insurance. They're tracking how you're driving. They do the gamification to incentivize you not to be driving at night, comparing you to your friends, etc. And it's all simple interventions that then change the business matrices incredibly. The same unit is then used, obviously, for tracking, and it can be sent off for when an incident happens. But the point is, by and large, a lot of the market is sitting at that bottom stack. There's a huge opportunity, as I've shown you in the previous slides, from a fleet monitoring perspective, freight monitoring, and then lastly, data monetization. I won't go deeply into the first two because I think the audience is pretty clear on that. Data monetization is about how do you start using your operational data to then cross-subsidize into another industry or to enable a totally new capability. If you think of the tracking industry, where today they were using the data to track our vehicles, by anonymizing the data and knowing where we are and the current speed that we're progressing, that's data they can then sell to a Google Apps or a Waze, which then allows for them to know when there's been a car crash or a traffic, and then reroute you accordingly based on those information that they're picking up. Another use case where we had a client who had a genuine problem where they wanted to track their assets in transit and see where they are, how long they're waiting at specific points. You would think that they have this data because these were on train tracks. So there's a lot of operational data there, but they had to plug in a third-party solution in order to identify this. So again, the market, you'll see a lot of the projections in the market for data monetization as very low because it's very difficult to understand that if I have this pocket of data that I'm using for operational purposes, who can I take that data to and sell it to, and it unlocks a lot of value. One of the last projects that I was busy with now was around just using cell phone data to help municipalities identify where riots could happen or where people might be in danger and alerting them simultaneously. Movement patterns, whether they should deploy emergency services in the event of something happening. We would have never thought of this on our own had it not been for the drivers and in other spaces as well. And that's the world that we're going into. The same data that you're offering up today without even thinking about it becomes valuable in a very different context. And this is where we get to a digital fleet. I think we were actually having this conversation with the group that we're in from lunch, is that you end up being in a situation where the one device that you put within the vehicle becomes valuable to a number of different stakeholders. It can be from your rental vehicles to new driver education, insurance, road charging, a new way for government to do e-tolls, fleet behavior, dealership maintenance, and remote emissions. And then plugging that in with contextual data, weather, you can create a whole new plethora of information and a view of your customer and what you're selling them. But it's also about how do you then collaborate as all these different entities, because you can't go in now and put 7 different devices in the car, but everybody needs this data. So how are you doing that in a seamless way? I'll leave it to this video, and with that, I'm done.
It's time for a driving experience that is more fun, more efficient, and safer. Ericsson is making this happen, connecting cars around the world. Improve your driving experience by accessing the controls in your car remotely. Unlock or lock it from your phone, wherever you are. Have your personal settings on and ready for you when you enter the car. Listen to your favorite entertainment apps while driving.
Open App Store.
When you want something new, download the latest music, news, weather, or other apps from your car's app store, just like you do on your phone.
Download Spotify.
And no matter where you're driving, you can stream without interruption. Get to your destination easily in any city or country without having to rely on your phone or another device to direct you there, whether the road is changed or traffic is jammed.
Traffic alert. Road closure up ahead.
Maps are updated with real-time conditions.
redirecting your route.
You'll be intuitively and safely guided by your 3 screens, keeping your journey efficient and relaxed. Your car can help you find and navigate to available parking, and even let you pay for it by a touch of your screen. Simple and easy, whether in a parking lot, garage, or city streets. When you're ready to leave your parking spot, your car knows and takes care of the payment. A car that tells you when it needs maintenance helps you avoid breakdowns and saves you money. A self-diagnostic system will run a health check and connect you to a service center before anything happens.
You need an oil check. Would you like to book a time at a service center?
Yes.
You have time in your calendar on Thursday. Do you want to book it?
Yeah, let's do that.
Appointment is confirmed.
You can safely update your car's system remotely with over-the-air updates.
An update is available. Would you like to do it now while you were parked?
Sure.
From infotainment to engine management and cruise control, your car will be updated for better performance throughout its lifespan. Your connected car should be able to communicate in real time with other vehicles and transportation infrastructure to help ensure a safer and more efficient journey. This will keep you updated on safety hazards or important information coming up on the road, such as ice, potholes, school zones, or accidents, while still keeping driver information safe and anonymous.
Warning, hazard up ahead.
When you drive a car connected by Ericsson, you're powered by the world leader in mobile connectivity platforms built for security, agility, and innovation. Enjoy the ride.